Welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to Drug Lord Tycoon. In my previous video I showed you how to optimize your weed farm, and now I'm gonna show you how to optimize your meth lab. I'm gonna show you 3 setups, one for low grade meth, one for medium grade meth, and one for high grade meth. And just like last time, if you have any questions to the meth setups, let me know in the comments and I'll check it out. But with that being said, let's move on to the first meth setup. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so let's start off with the more basic and the smallest meth lab. Yep, you might wonder, this was a weed farm just one video ago. Why did you turn it into meth station? Well, it's a quite small location, and it's a good location to start off with your meth, because meth doesn't require a lot compared to ingredients and to buildings and just the time it takes to cook and the skill it takes. When building and designing this, I thought to myself, 4 cook stations will be optimal. And this is because you could cook a batch, which is also one shelf, cook a batch, and when it's done cooking, you can put it onto the cooling stations, 2 on each side, and then when you wait for this to cool down, you can cook another batch with the next shelf. And then moving on, when it's cooled down, onto the crystallization tray so it can crystallize, then you can take number 2 batch, put it to cool down, and then make the 3rd batch while the other things are progressing. There are very few buildings to meth cooking. There's only a crystallization tray, a cooling tray, and a meth cook station. These of course have variants, but these are the starter ones when you've just unlocked meth cooking. I designed this for a one-man team with no workers, so I also made it remote and simple. You have your shelf with the production chemicals and a shelf with gas, or the propane tanks as it says here in the bottom. So you can work this out pretty quickly and pretty easy, because you don't have to move around a lot to get it cooking, just progressing and get onto this selling this meth. Also, a second thing on redesigning this location is that you get to keep the dealers. So, like we talked about in the last video, if you manage to get dealers with a high skill set and a low cut, you get to keep this, which will be a big advantage for you. Moving on, when you get a lot of XP, I've placed the research table right here in a remote location, so you can keep track of what you need to unlock next. Okay, I'm gonna give you one last look around. Here we have the meth packaging table, then we have the crystallization tray, cooling tray, and the 2 meth cook stations. So 1 crystallization tray, 2 cooling, and 2 lamps. Then we have the 2 shelves, as you've seen before, and then it's just mirrored onto the other side. This is perfect for a one-man team, as I've said, and it only costs about 28,500, not including the chemicals or the gas. But this is very cheap, especially compared to the big weed farm I made. The little downside is though that the supplies for a full shelf of gas and a full shelf of chemicals costs $7,800. Might seem like a lot compared to the cost of the lab, but we also have to remember that the meth sells for a lot more in the end, and it is not as difficult to work with as the weed. So yep, use this startup setup to learn how to cook meth and make a bit of cash before moving on to the next one. That would require a little bigger budget. And yes, you could of course just build a smaller meth lab, but it won't be as effective, because if it's smaller, then you just work, let's say, 2 meth labs or only 1, and then you have to wait for it to progress, and while waiting you're doing nothing, which is not effective and that is not optimized. But of course, if you're low on money, that is totally understandable. Here we have some top views. This is one of them, and this is the other top view. I hope you get a good idea of how to build it, and of course it doesn't have to be completely like mine, but I hope you get inspired. Yep, meth might seem like it's a bit more expensive, but it's worth it, trust me, and it is way easier to work with. But yep, that's it for this location, the smaller location. Let's move on. Okay, moving on. For the medium-sized meth lab, I've decided to use the biggest location available for now. But it's not the main warehouse. I chose to use the side warehouse because I thought that it would be like a side hustle kind of thing, and then do something else in the bigger house for when there are more drugs to come. But to start off with, I have the meth packaging table over here to the right, and my research table to the left. Then I've decided to double up and use 8 meth cook stations. Now level 2, of course, because we're moving on. I'm assuming you have unlocked a tier on anything, so a tier better cooling stations and a tier better, let's find it, a tier better crystallization trays. So these are level 2, these are level 2. I have 4 meth cook stations on the left. Then I have the 3 crystallization trays down here in the back. And then I have 4 meth cooling stations level 2 here. Then, same as before, I've decided to mirror it onto the other side. So again, 4 meth cooling stations and 4 meth labs. Then here in the middle, I've also decided to double down on the products. So now instead of 1 shelf, we have 2 shelves filled to the brim with production chemicals. And to the left of it, 2 more shelves with gas. Okay, let's talk price for a bit. For the first setup we had before, that was about $28,500. But for this one, it's a little higher budget you need for it, because this setup costs $79,000. But the low grade meth gives you 50 grams per cook. So one station makes 1 little cook, and that gives you 50 grams, which can be sold for $45 per gram, making up for $9,000 in profit if you had the old setup. Lucky for you, medium grade meth gives you 55 grams per cook, and each gram can be sold for $55. This is a double batch compared to the first setup. So if you make a batch on this setup consisting of 8 times cooking, 8 times cooling, and 8 times crystallization, that'll give you $24,200 in profits, or in revenue. So even though this setup is about 2.5 times more expensive than setup 1, you'll be ending up also making 2.5 times more in revenue. But let me show you another thing that is very nice since you've upgraded everything 1 tier in your research tree. Workers. Yep, you might not have the people who restock, the restockers, but you do have the workers. So your only job could potentially just be refilling the shelves, and then they'll cook for you and they'll put it on the table for you, so you can just pack it, deliver it to your dealers, and then just restock your shelves. And yep, since we talk about optimizing, this is a very, very needy method, of course, and same as the weed workers, you don't have much to worry about anymore. Even though it isn't the most advanced thing, since you just put 2 things in here and then it just cooks for itself, and then you move it 2 times and that's it. You still have more time to do other things. Like I said, I put this on the biggest map just so you could have it as a side hustle, and then over here you can have the real business. Now, before you can get to the most advanced meth lab, you want to make sure to have unlocked everything in your research tree, since I've made it so compact I don't think you can optimize it anymore. Just follow through. Before we move on to the final and most advanced setup, I have a question from this guy here, saying, why do you plant the 3 types of weed? I think it's best to only plant the purple. And I just wanted to summarize, because there's been some confusion. The short answer is, there is this distributor update coming on, and I think it's already started with the part 1, where you can sell large quantities of products at once. The only real issue is, when you're selling large quantities, they also take a higher cut. In the future, they're gonna make it so you can take over their territory and then still sell the large quantities, but with a smaller cut. Don't worry, I'm gonna make a video on the distributor update in the future. That's enough about weed farming, let's get on to the final setup. Welcome to the last setup. This is on Prince Street, I believe it's called, but it's the house. This is just a basement build, and I have something else here on top. but I want to show you that in a different video to showcase the whole house and the setup. But now let's just focus on the meth lab in the basement. 10 meth cook stations, level 3. And this is as compact as it gets. It's incredible. And I was even surprised that this would work. Here on the back line we have 5 cook stations. Then next to it we have 4 cooling stands, level 3, which have 2 on each, so 2, 4, 6, 8. Then we have 2 more cook stations. Then we have the 5th cooling station, so that makes 10. I figured since we have 10 meth stations, it would be smart to just have 10 cooling spots. Other than that, we have the final crystallization tray, which has 5 spots. We have 2 of those, 1 on each side here, to make it a little bit symmetrical. And then we have the last 3 cook stations. Here in the middle, we have 2 shelves for products, and that's the propane tank with gas and the meth production chemicals. In this setup, I'm assuming that you have unlocked every single item, including the meth stocker. Since this was gonna be the final build, you could just use the best things. I don't quite know if it was intentionally that you could put buildings on the stairs, but I took the opportunity and put 4 worker lockers. This was so we could have 3 meth workers and a restocker. And the smart thing about this, spoiler alerts, on top of here we have a weed farm. And the smart thing about having both a weed farm and a meth farm is that you save money on the supplier station, since you can have 2 suppliers, one for weed, one for meth, and still use the same station. That is pretty cool. Same as the other farms. Since I have 10 meth stations, that would be smart to also have 10 cooling spots and 10 crystallization spots. I made sure to do so, and I think you should prioritize that too. And I think it's important to prioritize having the same amount of spots for cooling and crystallization as the same of the meth cook stations. This is very smart because when you've done a batch, you can move it on to the next phase, which could be cooling, which could be crystallization, but you get the idea, same as before. Keep it as your number 1 priority if you make a custom meth lab. Well, what is the cost of this? To start off with, we have 10 meth cook stations, 5 meth cooling stations, level 3, 2 crystallization stations, level 3, a meth packaging table, 2 shelves for the products, and then we need 4 worker lockers. This concludes the price of the lab, which is $114,500. So, we're here at the meth table. Per cook, you get 60 grams of the high grade meth. So if you use 1 chemical and 1 gas tank, you'll get 60 grams. 1 gram of the high grade meth has a worth of $65, which means that 1 cook, as I said, 1 chemical and 1 gas tank, is $3,900. If we multiply the numbers to the whole lab, that gives us $39,000. But we have to minus the supplies, so that gives us $32,000 in profit. Profit, I said. I'll give you one last look at the lab. I'm very proud of this, since this is a very small location, the basement, and you're still able to just optimize it this much. I am very surprised actually. Yep, I think that's it for the high grade meth lab. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you got inspired and that you enjoyed the video. I really enjoy making these videos. I'm gonna make a future video of the new distributor update soon, and a new video on the Prince Street map, which I haven't shown you completely yet, because I have something else up my sleeve with that map. Well, I hope you have a good day. Thanks for watching.